Hi, I'm Professor Beck Strah.
And I'm Professor Eric Bronson, and you're listening to Prison Breakdown.
2, 3, break!
Hate to spoil his fun, but we're gonna bust out of here.
2, 3, break!
I'm locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
2, 3, break!
I can honestly say I'm a changed man. No danger to society here. God's honest truth.
2, 3, break!
I'm not leaving this cell. I'll get out my way. The right way.
2, 3, break!
Ahoy, dudes! Welcome to Prison Breakdown.
Ahoy. Ahoy. Welcome back. After a wonderful Thanksgiving break, back at it. Much colder temperatures out there now.
Indeed. Eric, how are you?
Great. It's cold out there right now. It's all the way down in the 30s again, and we're under the threat of snow on this side of Rhode Island, over here by Roger Williams University. So we might get a little flake
That's
or two.
too bad. It's too early.
It's not so. Growing up in Cleveland, and going out, we had obviously talked about Halloween recently. There were several Halloweens that I walked the streets of Cleveland, begging people for candy, saying trick or treat, right? And there was snow on the ground, or it had snowed. And so, we're almost done with November, and we haven't had the snow yet. It's kind of disappointing. I'm ready.
Yeah, in Alaska, growing up in Alaska, I think I mentioned this before, but trick-or-treating, your costume would always be obscured by your jacket because there was always snow on the ground. It was always cold. Yeah, Rhode Island is nice because it doesn't have that as much.
Didn't Alaska just have a massive winter storm like 2 weeks ago, right after we had done our last podcast?
Not only did it have a massive winter storm, it had like a record-breaking amount of snow, and the idiot mayor of Anchorage had essentially fired all the snowplow drivers, and now they're trying to get them back. They're not paying very well,
Right.
And apparently a lot of the streets are still held up. It'll be like a lane and a half on a 2-lane road.
Not good.
They also closed school for a whole week.
Nice. Well, one of my very good friends who lives in Alaska right now was she posted pictures of her and her friends shoveling snow off of roofs, packed nice and high already, and they wanted to make sure to get it off the roof of houses so it didn't stay there all winter and do any damage to the structure. So I imagine you guys were used to doing that sort of thing growing up.
You think I ever shoveled snow off a roof? You would be mistaken, my friend.
Come on now.
Britt, do you recall doing it?
Not shoveling snow, no. I spent a lot of time on like icy and snowy roofs when I was a cable guy, but like going up there to shovel off the snow, like most roofs in Alaska are made at a certain pitch, or grading, so that the snow will just kind of like fall off by itself.
I guess it was just the right consistency to really stick, to make it stay. But man, it seemed like a lot of snow really fast.
Yeah, I think y'all have a lot wetter snow over on the East Coast there than over here. We got dry, powdery stuff.
Yeah, I've seen video of folks going out there on the West Coast with leaf blowers and blowing snow off their driveway.
You can do it in a lot of conditions, yeah.
Yo, this is going to sound weird, but for years, I've not really been sure what a leaf blower is for. It's essentially like the lazy man's rake.
Do you want me to spell it out for you? It blows leaves.
No. I get that, but like, why would you need to? Is it just like blowing the leaves off my lawn? But apparently, you put them in a pile like you would with a rake.
Yeah. You kind of put them in a pile. More than anything, leaf blowers. Most people don't realize this. Like, if we didn't have leaf blowers, every single parking lot in America would just be fucking covered in leaves at all times.
Wow.
Yeah, and so people are like, "Oh, I hate the sound of leaf blowers." Which do you like more, clean parking lot or peace and quiet.
Yeah.
It's because you can only have one.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
They do contribute to the noise pollution. Are the electric ones any better?
I've got an electric one. It is a little bit better, but it still makes a shit ton of noise. When you're forcing that much air out of a
Yeah.
tube, it's gonna make a bunch of noise.
And it doesn't even, I mean, it won't blow anything off a dandelion, let alone leaf.
Yeah, the electric ones are fine. They're a lot more power efficient, obviously, and they're kind of a lot handier to have, and you don't have to like store them outside or store gas outside or anything like that. But yeah, they leave a lot to be desired so far as like drive and power goes.
Interesting. Before we get to the news today, I wanted to bring something up. I was thinking about it yesterday. I've never heard of a magician trying to escape from prison. Have you two?
No,
I'm pretty sure it's been a thing.
that sounds
That
fun.
seems like it would be. Wouldn't that be like a cool magic trick of like somebody goes to prison and as a trick they escape?
That would be fun. There's got to be a movie about something like that, right? I know there's movies
There
about
has to be.
magicians.
And I've been racking my brain.
Yeah, magicians performing heists, but there's got to be something about a magician trying to escape from a prisoner. Who knows?
Houdini escaped from a prison. It looks like.
Did he really? I think there should be an episode in the future about magic in prisons. I don't know if this has been done.
I don't know.
I'm putting it in my notes.
There we go.
But I'm probably going to delete.
Don't you touch that. It belongs in that note.
All right, are we ready for a little news off the razor wire?
Let's get into it.
Fresh news, hot off the razor wire.
Oh, so much news to catch up on here relating to corrections and prisons and jails. I don't even know where to start. We could have a whole episode on the recent news that we need to discuss. But first off, let's start with our story we've been covering now for the last few podcasts, the 4 escapees from Georgia. And on November 18th, the last escapee was caught. So Joey Fournier, who was 52 and being held on charges of murder for supposedly murdering his ex-girlfriend, who was found choked to death, was caught. He was arrested in Stockbridge. So there's not a whole lot of detail about the situation when they found him, but all 4 are now back in jail and in custody. So what's impressive about Fournier is that he was out for just over a month. When we talk about people escaping from prison, we're normally looking at 4, 6 hours, 8 hours, but like I said, this guy was out for over a month, and knowing that he was being held on murder charges, they were out looking for him in full force.
Yeah, that is really impressive. I wonder if that speaks to either his ability to escape detection, 2, like the resources that the state is putting into it, and 3, like the competence of the state's resources that they're putting into it.
Yeah, well, and then
Maybe a confluence of all 3.
Yeah, and you also got not only Georgia and Georgia State Police, but the feds were in on it too. So it was he was doing a really good job of blending in. So it was a good 30 days out, more than 30 days out. That's impressive. Respect for that escapee.
So are there any details provided on like why he's in Stockbridge?
No.
What's he doing there? How did they find him? Nothing.
No, there's
That's
very
the interesting
little
stuff.
I think now that they have them all, they're like, all right, let's move on. So there's no more embarrassment for the jail there in Bibb County, or the sheriff. The only thing that the sheriff made a statement, and we are grateful that this last escapee has been captured. My heartfelt appreciation goes out to all the hardworking law enforcement officers from Bibb County Sheriff's Office and from all of our partner agencies who work tirelessly to bring these 4 fugitives back into custody. And that's from Sheriff David Davis of the Bibb County jail. So That's really it. There's not much.
Do we know if anyone collected on the reward money? If there was any anonymous tips? Or
It's funny. I was looking that up yesterday. I did not see anything on that. So
Would it be fortunate or unfortunate to be born with a name like David Davis? Like,
yeah,
it's got too much alliteration to it.
yeah.
It's too much.
Robbie Roberts. I remember meeting a Robbie Roberts one time. So
Yeah, that'd be tough. There was a Patrick McPatrick or something like that who was a client of the accounting firm I worked for, and you're like, man, what a name.
so my mom
It's rich.
my mom, before I was born, and when I was really little, worked in the OB unit at the Metro Hospital there in Cleveland, and there were some really unique names. And my all-time favorite was a woman wanted to name her daughter Chlamydia.
No.
My mom had to they had to work with this woman for hours to talk her out of naming their daughter Chlamydia. It's just such a pretty name.
I guess there's no law. There's no law that says you can't name your child that.
No, you absolutely can. Can you imagine what that poor girl, the life she would have growing up? How relentless the torture would be?
Yeah, you can't even short.
No.
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 No, it's too much.
Yeah.
Like Musk's kids and their stupid names.
Yeah. Speaking of stupid, did you see Michael Jackson's son changed his name? Blanket?
Yeah. It was BB or something
Yeah.
now, or
Yeah.
yeah, I saw that.
Blanket.
It's good on them.
Blanket was a cool name though.
It's not, because like the other kids' names are like Prince
Right.
and something else.
Right.
Like the other kids have like real
He gets
names.
Blanket.
Yeah.
He gets like the shittiest name of all the kids. Like, by
Blanket?
far.
Wait,
That's
isn't
fun.
Blanket the one that was held over the railing at the resort?
It is, yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oof.
Great.
Yeah, the other two kids' names are Prince and Paris, which are like legitimate, real, okay names.
Right.
Blanket, come on.
No.
But if you can rename yourself, like, I mean, BB's a fine name, but it's not cool like Paris or Prince.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Rename yourself to join like the cool name club, like your siblings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like Beck or Britt. Those are some pretty cool names. It's not a boring name like Eric. All right. So on to news article or piece number 2 of the week. Recently, in the month of November, and it's going to be closed down officially by the New York City's Department of Corrections, will be the last jail / correctional facility, whatever you want to call it, that is a barge that they have docked there in the East River in the South Bronx. So the Vernon C. Bain Correctional Center, a 5-story jail barge that has the capacity to hold 800 individuals, which was opened as a temporary measure back in 1982 to relieve overcrowding at Rikers, is officially shutting down. And what the city,
Wow.
yeah. So what the city, New York City, is doing is they are working on coming up with new correctional centers throughout the city that are going to be smaller than Rikers Island. So here's the interesting part about this is currently they have approximately 500 individuals being held on this barge, or they've been moved on. And where did they go? They went to Rikers Island. So that pushes Rikers Island's population up over 14,000 individuals. And so they said, oh, this,
Wow.
yeah, it's just massive. Now, Rikers Island has 10 separate institutions technically, but it's just, that's bigger than a lot of universities, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, their goal is to eventually close Rikers Island, I guess, or at least, downsize the number of individuals that are there and have smaller houses of corrections throughout the city that are easier to manage. and rather than having them all in one place that seems to have, from what I understand, daily assaults and violence, which is, that's, you can understand it with 14,000 inmates that they're having, and they average an assault a day, which is, that's great for Hollywood, but that's unmanageable and not very safe.
Yeah, they're talking about shutting it down when in 2025. Is that right?
So the barge is officially closed now, but Rikers, they have a goal to um to have that new places throughout the city within the next few, it's not going to be a quick thing, but yeah, that they're going to immediately start finding new places to put folks and have them be smaller. Now, obviously, if they have smaller, I mean, when we talking about 1,000 inmates in one, that's not a small institution. That's still massive. But if you've got 14 institutions spread throughout the city, um, that's going to be tough on resources being sent all over the place. So
Yeah, you're not kidding. One shutting down starts to strain the resources for all the others in the area, I'm sure.
right.
Now, the important question here, I'll ask the two of you. Would you rather spend a week on the prison barge or a week on that Carnival cruise where the engine room caught fire and
Yeah.
the raw sewage is floating floor to floor?
I,
Ooh, that's a difficult one.
yeah, I don't know. What deck do we get to pick? Our
You
deck?
don't know.
Do we get to pick our deck and the Carnival cruise?
No.
No.
Bottom deck.
So we're sentenced to either one, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a sentence. But which do you choose and why?
No, the prison barge. Cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm going to go for Carnival because I assume they might have better food.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
better
Maybe
bedding.
At
not
least they probably have
today.
the frozen yogurt machine still working.
Yeah. Oh.
I just don't know how good the food is going to taste when you have raw sewage at your feet. I don't know. I'm going to the prison barge.
Fair.
Beck, what about you?
Yeah, I think I'd choose the Carnival cruise. I think maybe I'd be able to. You get like the top deck and maybe play some shuffleboard.
There you go.
And get some of that sea air to take that smell out of you.
Now, is the Carnival cruise ship at sea or is it docked?
Is the prison barge always docked?
Yeah, it's
Or
always. It doesn't
take,
move.
Do they take like prison cruises?
No.
Oh.
No, the prison barge is always docked. It just looks like a big ass tanker.
Do you think it would be more fun if they took cruises with it?
Oh hell yeah!
Oh, how about marketing it as a prison cruise?
There-
Or like now that it's being decommissioned.
Yeah, they could do that. The Department of Corrections in New York City could make a lot of money off of that. Just rather than a tour like they do at all the old prisons that aren't working, they could just, hey, we got a prison cruise. You get to sleep in a cell, no pool.
That's not a selling
Every
point.
once in a while, we'll come by your cell and shake you down.
Yeah. It could be something for like the wealthy elite.
Yeah, have a dinner cruise. It's a sunset special. We'll just have 2-hour-long cruises on the barge.
I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be educational. I'm on board. You can sign me up. I'm the first. I will be the first to sign up for this. Otherwise, what are we doing? What is going to be done with this prison barge? It will just sit there.
It doesn't say what they're doing with it, so I imagine they do not have plans for it right now. Again, this was supposed to be a short-term, temporary measure back in 1982. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, indeed. See, I think about that a lot. Like what they do with prisons after they're done. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Philadelphia for a conference, and I went to the Eastern State Penitentiary, which, as we know, is one of the first prison institutions in our country and the oldest standing one. And it's open now as a tourist attraction, and it's got a great walking tour with self-guided tour with Steve Buscemi narrating what's going on in the prison in your ears. And that's a cool testament. And it has some more modern exhibits and gives you some facts on mass incarceration. But besides that, what can we do with old prisons? That might be something to investigate in the future. And an episode is like, what can we do with them? And prison is a very distinct building. There may not be a ton of other uses for it.
No,
but I'd be curious to see what people have done.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what the limitations are, is that you turn them into museums, opportunities to learn from the structure. But the big issue with them is, is the heating and cooling costs. Because, if you got a place that doesn't have adequate heating or heating, and they have very high ceilings, it's hard to get tourists to go through there. Or if it's somewhere down south at all, and in the summer, hey, come tour our miserably hot hell prison. I don't know. I know the one from Shawshank, the old Ohio State Reformatory. I've been there a couple of times. They do some fun stuff where you can sleep overnight for the ghost tour, because it was a reformatory, so lots of lobotomies were performed there, and they say it's haunted with all of those inmates who passed away there. So they make a good penny doing that. So it's very touristy, but the tours that they run during the day are very educational.
Yeah, I would love to see something like that. But besides museums, it feels like we can't turn every old prison into a museum. And if we ever take our incarceration rates down enough that mass incarceration is somehow not eliminated, but at least like much less of a problem in the United States, we're just going to be left with all these crumbling old institutions. Not all of them can be turned into museums. Not everyone is going to be interested in seeing 10 prison museums in some states.
Well, I already have one in mind. We have that old Panopticon over there in Terre Haute, Indiana. I want to turn that into a nightclub and call it the Pub Opticon. Have the bar in the middle where the guards used to be. It's the Pub Opticon.
Yo,
everybody.
That's so cool. I am into this.
The line would be halfway up Indiana and Indianapolis trying to get into the Pub Opticon. We could have a Bentham special, when have a drink special for Bentham when it hits a certain hour. So who knows, or certain songs are played, or whenever the DJ says
the Bentham hour.
Yeah, the Bentham hour. Or whenever the DJ says Bentham.
Bentham!
You got to bottoms up your drink whenever the DJ yells Bentham.
I don't know if people care about Jeremy Bentham as much as we would want.
No. Well, I think the other fun thing we could do is we could have, like on Thursday nights, we could have the Pub Opticon lockdown. And what we do, because I've heard about these in other places, and I wouldn't be shocked if either one of you attended one of these types of nights. We'll have the lockdown, and so you pay the cover charge to get in. Let's just say, because it's in Indiana, we don't have to charge much, right? It's out in the middle of nowhere in Terre Haute. There's not much going on there, just corn. And we lock down the bathrooms, and you pay your cover charge, and the bathrooms are locked until someone has an accident and urinates all over themselves. And after
what in the hell are you talking about?
Have you not heard about these?
Continue.
No. My cousin went to school in Ashland University there in Ohio, and one of the bars there had a night. For some reason, I think it was a Wednesday night. I don't know, whatever the hell it was. But you pay your cover, and you go in, and drinks are free until somebody just pees all over themselves. And so yeah. But you just pay an outrageous cover fee.
Oh, so the best way to do it is to kind of squirrel away your drinks and wait for that person to pee their pants.
Well, so what I found out from her is that guys would get together and they would stand around a circle when a guy had to pee, and he'd pee into a bottle. And so it was always a female who ruined the night for everybody in the pub. And because it's not like everybody can circle up and have her pee in a bottle. So
Mm, yes,
yeah,
there are problems.
definite problems. But that's what we would do at our pub Opticon.
Have either of you ever been to one of those lock-ins? They would have those for like churches and for like youth group type situations when I was younger.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I went to one of them at our old church. It was just an overnight lock-in. It was fine.
So what
What did
happens
you
at a
do?
lock-in?
We like played games and like read the Bible, and I remember we went over the Lord's Prayer, and they made sure that we all knew the Lord's Prayer. I still know the Lord's Prayer, even though I haven't been to church in a decade plus.
Yeah, but you use it all the time. I
All the
bet.
time. It's just something I repeat to myself, when I'm going to sleep.
Well, I imagine on Thursday, Thanksgiving, you said it, right? Over your turkey.
I certainly did. I prayed a lot that day. I found religion for one day.
Yeah, there we go.
Now, Eric, hit us with that third news
So,
story. What's up your sleeve?
Third big prison news story from this week. We all remember Derek Chauvin, who was convicted
Oh, yeah.
of murdering George Floyd back in 2020. So
Now one might call him Derek Shivving.
So the former Minneapolis police officer who was convicted of murdering George Floyd back in 2020 was stabbed at a federal prison in Arizona last Friday. That's great.
That's some world star shit.
What was that?
Sorry.
All right. So back to our story. Chauvin was attacked and stabbed multiple times at the federal prison FCI Tucson, which is a medium security federal prison. No details are immediately available upon his condition. However, the last that I've heard is that he is stable and improving. Obviously, due to health laws, they don't give out a whole bunch of information unless Chauvin and his attorney want it to be released. So most likely this will turn into a lawsuit, and here's the reason why: is because the Eighth Amendment says that once the government assumes control over you in a prison, they have a duty to protect you in certain cases. And then not all violence in prison is the fault of the prison or the state, but legal standard requires negligence or some kind of indifference on the part of the prison according to law. So what's interesting about this is that Chauvin's attorney warned the prison multiple occasions that having him in general population would lead to some sort of attack. And
Unsurprising.
yeah, that's obvious. He's one of the most hated men in America, locked up in a place where individuals don't look too kindly on police officers. So yeah, they could, the family and the attorneys could say they could see this coming. So they do have a case here, probably to take the feds to court. Now, what is interesting is this has just been a horrible month for Chauvin, because his appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court was rejected on the 21st. So he was appealing his conviction for the second-degree murder and his 22.5-year sentence, and that was tossed out after the high court said no thank you, and they denied it with no comment, which pretty much means they are not going to hear that case.
Yeah, it seems like one of those, like, well, the Supreme Court as it currently stands is a mess. it feels like every now and then they'll take on a case like that's not it doesn't buy them goodwill necessarily, but it's like a token case that they're like, see, we're still rational sometimes, even though it costs them very little to decide this.
Right. But that's one,
But
denying it with no comment, that they're not going to take up that appeal anytime. There's just no reason for them to. They don't get any political gain out of taking his case. So, but it is an interesting thought that, about what his family and his attorney have said, that repeatedly, that he should not be in general population, and then this happens. So, they will have a case against the feds if they want it.
yeah, also that's crazy that this guy's not in PC given his status as a former police officer,
Yeah.
and a guy who murdered an unarmed man,
Right.
and especially an unarmed black. That I cannot see why, like, what's behind the decision making processes on the part of the prison administrators, but
Right.
it seems foolish, and it makes you wonder, like, is he going to be in PC or some kind of like protective solitary for the rest of his time there, which would be that's a hard existence too.
Yeah. That's I think that's an obvious one, that when if you were the warden, or if you were Colette Peters, who is the director of the Bureau of Prisons, that's an easy one to say, no, let's put this person in protective custody. It's really kind of shocking that that wasn't done.
Yeah, when I worked in a jail, our protective custody unit, it was typically all sex offenders, but occasionally we would get the disgraced police officer who had committed some crime on the job, or allegedly had committed some crime on the job and been caught, and they would end up in there as well, because they have to be like, whatever your crime is, if you're in prison, especially, well, if you're in prison under any circumstances, like, you should be protected from stuff. This
Yeah.
is not to defend Derek Chauvin or anything that he's about.
Nope.
But people deserve to be safe and secure, and it opens up these government organizations who are funded by taxpayers to liability and paying out lots of money when that's infringed upon. So yeah, it sounds like a mess, quite honestly.
Yeah, it really is, on all the way around. And you don't want anyone to have to worry about being attacked or stabbed while they're being locked up. But we do know the realities of these places, and obviously, someone of this, with his history background, he was going to be a target. Like I said, I'm shocked that he wasn't in protective custody. So, but that's the news.
Yeah.
Like I said, lots of fun news off the razor wire this week. Updates of stories we've been talking about for a couple weeks now, and some new fun and exciting news with a closure of an institution barge, the last remaining prison or jail barge in the country, and then an update of inmate being assaulted. So lots to chat about.
Yeah, it's almost sad. Our first news story finally being put to bed with some real resolution.
That's right.
But you know what? On to bigger and better news stories.
Yes.
That was a good one, and I'm sure we'll have more escape news in the future.
Yes, I'm sure we will. There's always going to be somebody who's going to look at a situation and say, I got to run.
Yes. Now, I think we should get to the main event.
Yes.
Let's get back to talking about the Rhode Island Department of Corrections. Now, where we left off, we were talking about the 6 institutions that are in the state of Rhode Island, and we were up to the Anthony P. Travisono Intake Service Center, called Intake for short. And the intake serves as the jail for male inmates in the state of Rhode Island. And Rhode Island is one of 6 states that have unified systems. We discussed this a little bit last time, but the short version is all of our jails and prisons are run by the Rhode Island Department of Corrections, whereas in some other states, jails will be run by county sheriffs and managed by county sheriffs. That's not the state in Rhode Island, where it's all run by the state. Now, the Intake Service Center, it's a maximum security facility technically, but there are people at different levels of custody. It holds only male offenders and has about 1,500 beds. Now, Eric and I recently had the opportunity to tour the Intake Service Center. And Eric, what were your impressions of it?
So I'll tell you what was quite interesting is that the just how packed in everybody was in the institution, and you can tell that when they're moving inmates around because of the multiple levels. You had inmates on one floor, inmates on another floor. You have dining on a different floor. So when you have different, when these different stories in terms of levels of the institution, that always, when you have a staircase, you just got to worry about what kind of dangerous things are going to happen when the inmates are heading to dining, or any other situation where they have movements going up and down those stairs. It just, to me, that makes me nervous, because we're not talking about an open, cell block or dormitory where we have inmates coming down off the second tier or something. We're talking about a normal stairwell. And it just looked like it was just set up for something, an inmate to be attacked and, shoved down the stairs or whatever. And, but I was impressed with the organization of the institution, because while we were there, and for those folks who aren't around jails or prison much, intake centers and jails they're the perfect recipe for explosions, just because you have people coming in off the streets, they're detoxing, there's no established hierarchy, or if there is one, inmates are constantly trying to test it. And it's just the jails are just the perfect recipe for random violence, I guess, as I like to talk to the students about, is this difference between, planned out violence versus random violence in institutions, and which one's worse and why. And jails are just, they are just, hotbeds for random violence. And, you could tell that the institution's doing a good job of seeming to keep that down. Although for our wonderful Roger Williams University students that went with us to the intake center, I think it was a little bit eye-opening about what life inside there is like.
Yeah, I think that they were surprised. My students were very surprised when we went into a cell block and inmates were all locked in, but some of them were yelling out of the cells, and my students, a lot of students don't know how to react when inmates are talking to them like that, or yelling at them like that. And a couple of them described being surprised by it after, and made to feel uneasy by it. But that's in no fault of the Department of Corrections there. It's just
No.
inmates being inmates and goofing. They did not appear to be meaning the students any harm. They were just like I don't know, warehoused, held like caged animals, unfortunately.
Yeah,
at the time.
And I think I think that for my group, we went to the medium first, and the medium is very well established in terms of how long the inmates have been there. They know the hierarchy. The inmates know the routine. They know the rules that they're supposed to follow in terms of when visitors show up. So all the interactions we had with inmates at the medium, it was very respectful in terms of their discussion. It's just, as one of the students mentioned, it seems like normal conversation. Whereas when we went into
so much more orderly.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we went into the cell block there at the intake, it was a couple hours after you had been there, maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. and the inmates had still been locked down since when you were there. And so, they were already a little wound up after being in there for quite some time. And, when you have a group of 20 people come onto the cell block, every head in the cell block was popping into the window, and there was a lot of hollering going on, lots of fun noises being made. The staff ended up, having to holler at the inmates a few times, getting them to quiet down. So it was very eye-opening for the students.
Yeah. It should also be mentioned here for anyone unfamiliar with how lockdowns work. So lockdowns can be administrative. So if inmates are too loud, or if they're getting in a fight, or if there's some kind of issue in the prison itself, they can be locked down for that. But they can also be locked down just in regular intervals. So inmates, I believe in this case, were locked down for something like it was break time for the corrections officers, or they had cleaners out on the floor of the unit, and they're doing their thing. So we do have these regularly scheduled lockdowns that are just built into the inmate's day that are going to be the same thing, same time every day.
Yeah. And this was, it was interesting because when we arrived, they said, "Oh, the inmates are going to be coming to the dining hall. We'll hang out here." And after a few minutes of being in that central corridor by the dining, they said, "Okay, well, let's go on upstairs." And they were still in their cells, and so clearly this was not a planned lockdown. There was something going on, which of course they're not concerned with whether or not, the reasons why they had people in a lockdown. So, they're not going to tell us what the hell was going on. But, it was something that where the inmates had been there for quite some time, which again, having a couple tours go through gets them a little wound up. But, but like I said, I was impressed with the way they were running the institution, because they got a lot of individuals there, in a very small space, seems like.
Yeah. Now a few fun facts about it. So they've got the bed capacity for 1,500 inmates, and the average number of inmates they have around there is around 750, and it costs about $81,000 per person incarcerated there. The facility itself was completed in 1982, and that was the south wing of the facility. And then the rest of the facility, which is now the north wing of the facility, was added on and completed in 1992. And there was also a renovation in the mid-90s, around 95. On average, though, inmates spend around 27 days being held in intake. This can be accounted for by some inmates going to trial, some inmates taking a plea, some inmates just being in there for a few days because maybe it's a DUI or some crime that they would have a short time to spend on the offense anyway, or some inmates might be bailed out. So it's going to have the shortest amount of time spent there of any of the facilities. They've got pretrial inmates, and then a handful of sentenced inmates that are awaiting classification who are being sent to other facilities. And this facility also serves as an overflow for the prisons run by Rhode Island DOC. If there's too many inmates, or say an inmate has too many enemies at a certain prison, some kind of issues with keep separates, they can ship them off to intake.
Yeah, and that part of the reason why we have such a shortened number of days, the 27 days, is Rhode Island has the highest rate of individuals in community-based corrections. So that's both probation and parole. So we're much more likely to find a way to get people out back out on the streets and back with their, in their homes, or with their families, back to a job, than a lot of these states, which are far more punitive and want to keep more people locked up. So, because when you hear 27 days, you're like, oh, that's really not that long. But we have to remember, some of those folks are going in and turning around and coming right back out. So their stay is just a few hours. And then so that means there are plenty of people with 60 days, 90 days, few years in there. When you're getting over those 700 commitments, there's a lot of them that are leaving pretty quick, but there's a lot of them that are staying there for quite some time.
2, 3,
break!
All right, gang, it's on to the women's facility. The Gloria McDonald Women's Facility. It's on the same campus as all the other Rhode Island DOC buildings, and it opened in 2010. Eric and I have not been to this one, but it was built from a converted hospital building. It was originally constructed as this reintegration center for male inmates, but it ended up being used as a women's prison. It's got a capacity of around 200 inmates, but on average, holds about 100, and annually costs $170,000 per person incarcerated there. It's a lot of money. It houses all the women who are incarcerated in the state of Rhode Island, though. This means minimum security, medium security, work release, pretrial, and they even have a segregation unit for inmates who present any kind of behavioral or administrative issues. Pretrial inmates at the facility are held in a maximum security setting, and they do offer a number of programs there, some basic education classes, some GED courses, college courses, computer classes, creative writing, creative arts workshops, parenting courses, and reentry programs. And they also have some rehabilitative programs that include like substance abuse treatment, domestic relations, and counseling for victims of sexual violence. Eric, do you have anything to add to the women's facility?
No, I think it'd be wonderful one of these days if we could get in there and tour the place. I think one of the things I've just recently talked about women in prison and jails in my corrections class with my students, and one of the things that I talk about is how the uniqueness of Rhode Island and how small the state is, and because of that, all of our institutions are right there within a few blocks of each other. Right, we can have inmates throwing stones at other inmates at different institutions if they, if they played baseball when they were young, but because of that, because of our uniqueness and our size and having all of the institutions right there along with one another, the women's institution really can um, they can have the possibility to offer a lot of different programs and services for the inmates there. Whereas we look at a lot of other states that are much larger in size and have larger prison populations. One of the programs we were talking about this week were there's a program in Indiana where they allow the moms to keep their babies for up to 2 years at one of the institutions at their maximum security prison there
Illinois
in
has something
Indiana.
similar, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great program. I know it has some controversy to it, but that it benefits the moms, it benefits the kids. They have a lower likelihood of being juvenile delinquents and lifetime criminals. But when we look at those states, take a state with like Indiana, that's not a huge state in terms of land mass or population. They have 3 women's prisons, and they have an intake center, they have a medium, and then they have a maximum. And the maximum is the large one because it can hold the maximum and the medium inmates, and it just seems to be the institution where they put a lot of their resources. It's not very unusual for a state to only have 1 or 2 prisons for women. Well, it makes it really difficult in most states for the inmates when there is only 1 or 2 prisons throughout the state for families to go and visit. So one of the major issues that female inmates have is the loneliness factor inside institutions. And I think that that's something because of how tiny Rhode Island is. And it's one of the things that we joked around about in my class. The bus, RIPTA here, our busing system in the state of Rhode Island, goes right to the ACI. So family members can get a bus ride to the institutions and go and visit their family members and ride a bus home. So,
That's rad.
it's I think, it's pretty unique what we have here in terms of our size and having the one women's institution here in the state, and it allows for a lot more visitation than what you see in most states where they only have a few institutions and they're just tucked away in odd places throughout the state.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it also can address class disparities by offering buses and hopefully they offer buses at like regular intervals and from multiple locations. So inmates who are low income, maybe their families would be low income as well. We know a lot of inmates come from low income communities, so having their families able to take transportation to visit them is paramount. And visitation can make such a difference for inmates and gives them a sense of community on the outside, gives them some community to be able to draw upon for reintegration processes. So that's so important.
Yeah, yeah, no, and being connected with their families is just, having visitors, because we know most inmates stop receiving visitation after 3 years of being locked up, and being that we are in such a tiny state with access to public transportation throughout much of the state, that's going to make a world of difference to those people who are locked up, so, and their family members, obviously.
Yeah, and for incarcerated women, if we look at men who are incarcerated, they will often stay together with their partners during incarceration. It's much more rare for male partners to stick around with incarcerated female partners. It's for whatever reason, just it's it's a near zero percentage, and that's super sad. So we see a lot of women hung out to dry, and they're missing their partners on the outside. They're missing their kids, and at least this gives them some resource to be able to see people more often if people are unable to afford transportation by other means. One thing I also want to point out with the women's facility, students will ask me now and then, are male corrections officers allowed to work with female inmates, or are female corrections officers allowed to work with male inmates? And the answer is yes. Male corrections officers are not allowed to pat down female inmates, and that's for safety and security reasons and for to avoid any potential for sexual abuse there, which great idea. So males pat down males, females pat down females, and this goes by the biological basis, by sex. Um, and several years ago, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, referred to as PREA, was put into effect. And one of the PREA rules that needs to be abided by opposite sex officers in whatever prison they're working on is if I, as a male corrections officer, walk into a female unit, say I'm going to go walk through and just do an inspection, make sure everything is okay. I have to yell something like "male on the floor," so and give the female inmates a couple minutes, so they can make sure they're dressed when I'm walking by, and there's no potential for abuse on that end.
No, that's a really important step that was, that came out of that, because I think there was such a potential for abuse at at institutions, whether male or female. One of the things that we talked about, the babies being in prison, is are these women who are locked up for more than 9 months, and then all of a sudden end up pregnant. So we know it's, that they're having they're having intercourse with a staff member, um, and getting pregnant that way, which is clearly, a horrible situation, because the imbalance of power that exists there, and
Yeah,
it's just
it's never really consensual.
exactly. There's way too much power. Um, so it's we got to have these measures in place.
Yeah, completely agree. Another thing to touch upon is it's important that women's facilities receive gender responsive programming. We can't just give programming as this one size fits all, because we do need to recognize that male offenders and female offenders have different pathways into offending, and they don't necessarily cluster in the same types of crimes. They're not led into more I guess offending likely lifestyles by the same means. So it's important that we provide programs that can address criminogenic needs for female offenders and male offenders, while recognizing that it doesn't necessarily cover the same bases. But we can talk more about that on another cast. For now, I want to talk about a couple of closed facilities. There was originally another women's facility. It was called the Bernadette Building. It held up to 100 women. In 2010 to 2011, the facilities were closed. Inmates were split between the Bernadette building for a while, where it was minimum security and work release, and the Gloria McDonald Women's Facility, which is what is used now. And that was pretrial and medium security at the time. But in 2016, all female inmates, all pretrial detainees were moved into the Gloria McDonald building. And it's never really officially been closed, but it's a prison that's currently empty. We also had the Donald Price Medium Security Prison.
Well, here, let me.
Oh, go for it, Eric.
Yeah. So this Bernadette building, I mean, that's younger than both of us, even you. I mean, this building's a baby. So, kind of wonder what's going on there that they stopped housing offenders there. But yeah, let's get a tour of the Bernadette building too. Let's go see what's going on.
I would imagine it's in part because populations are down, because we don't have the same high populations that we would have had in like 2008, 2009, 2010 at the peak of mass incarceration. Like, while mass incarceration is still a problem, our prison populations are down to, just a couple of years ago, we had prison populations at 2.1 million, and we're down to somewhere between 1.9 and 2 million.
Yeah, you got to figure with a newer building though, there'd still be, yeah, this building's 12 years old. I mean,
Yeah,
the same age as my kid.
Quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me crazy. Why is it we got a building that's 12 years old and we're not using it for? But I think they have offices in there that they're being used for.
Yes, I believe you are correct. I have mailed something to a corrections officer, and his office was in that building.
In the Bernadette building. Okay.
Unsurprising that it's not holding any inmates at this time.
Maybe because there's just over 100 females, and this can only hold 100. I don't know.
I don't know either. So another closed facility that's out there is the Donald Price Medium Security Facility. It was constructed in 1929, opened in 1932. As of November 2011, they closed their doors. It was there for a long time, used to hold male juvenile offenders. It originally closed in 1992, opened again in 1997, and then in 2011, they said, nah, we're closing this to save costs. It held around 278 offenders, but with capacity of 324. That's another one I haven't seen. There's a lot of buildings on the campus that you don't know what they do.
Yeah.
There's a couple of buildings on the campus that are like, oh, wow, that building's very old and in need of rehabilitation. So pretty spooky.
Yeah, there's a few of them over there.
But those buildings do not hold inmates.
Yeah, there's a few of them over there on that campus. And when you go by them, there's it's a situation where there's plants growing out of gutters, and you see a limb coming out of an office window, and it's not somebody's plant that's sitting there on their desk with a nice office plant. It's it's just they've been closed up for a while, and there's a broken window with a branch sticking out of it. So there's a few of them that I'd love to be able to take a peek in just to see what the hell's going on there. But I'm sure though, I don't have enough pull with the state. Now maybe you with your good looks could go in there and bat your eyes at the Department of Corrections, and they'll let us go through.
Yeah, they love it when you bat your eyes. It would be very interesting to see. I think a lot of it is probably just nature taking back over. There was a town in Alaska, Whittier, Alaska, where the entire town lives in a barracks, and it's a newer barracks. And the older barracks you used to be able to walk into. They had some bowling alleys, and they had some. It was just a bunch of apartments, and you used to be able to walk in there, and there's like asbestos, like stalactites and stalagmites. I don't remember the difference. And,
no, there's a great way to remember this. There's a great way to remember this. Stalactites, they hang tight to the ceiling.
Oh, that's really good. I will remember that. You can quiz me next time. They hang tight to the ceiling.
They hang tight to the ceiling.
But yeah, I love the idea of seeing old abandoned buildings. It's always interesting.
Yeah. That's one of the great things when you go through Europe, seeing these, when we think old buildings here, we're like, oh, it's 70 years old. And you go to Europe and you're seeing buildings that are 600, 700, 800 years old, 1,000 years old. And it's really fun.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy. One thing I love watching on YouTube is like old abandoned malls or stadiums, and how a lot of them will sit there for a long time. Some of them only 30 years old, but 30 years old might be a long time for a stadium, but it takes so much in terms of resources to even open
Right.
that stadium
Right.
that it's crazy that we're closing it after like 30 years because they want something more up to date.
Well, and it's what's crazy is to watch these mall as all these malls, these indoor malls are closing throughout America. It's amazing how quickly an abandoned building just deteriorates. And it's devastating for the building to not have activity in it. It just blows my mind to see, that people have videos from it. This mall's been closed for 2 years and it's totally fallen apart. And it's not like somebody's gone through and ransacked the place. It's just nature and the environment and lack of care, and that's fallen apart.
Yeah, it is consistently fascinating to me. Now, let's touch on a couple issues going on with the Rhode Island DOC. First, we're going to discuss recruitment. This is a nationwide issue for corrections, but it's hard to recruit correctional officers at this time. The last class that went through the Rhode Island DOC Academy only had 16 officers, and they received hundreds of applications, but their hiring standards are high, and only a fraction of those hundreds of applications actually qualifies to make it to the academy. And staffing shortages in prisons are really, really tough. And because you have people incarcerated in these facilities, somebody needs to be watching over them 24 hours a day. And this results in people having to work way more overtime than they want to at times. Did you see much of this in your time working in prisons, Eric?
So when I was working there, I think back in the 90s, the prison staffing wasn't much of an issue, and just in terms of sure there was turnover just like any other. I'd say high. I don't know if it's high pressure, but high stress type of job. You're going to have turnover, but it's not like what it is today. I mean, it's um, it. I would, it's. I wouldn't say it's catastrophic right now, but we're getting close to that. I know there are Department of Corrections throughout the country that are offering sign-on bonuses. After 6 months, you get another bonus after a year. Um, you know, Part of it is that there are really good paying jobs out there that were, that are available, and so people are just looking at, well, I can make the exact same amount of money without having um, have this high stress job where you're surrounded by inmates, and whether that stress is real um, or not. Some people might say, oh, it's not that bad, it's not that stressful, but we all know that if you define a situation as real, it's real, and its consequences for the individual. um it
The definition of the situation.
That's right. And so it's they'll define it as real and say, hey, this is not something I want to deal with. I don't, and I first one to admit it. The opportunity came up that I was able to teach a college class when I was working on my master's, because boy, I thought I wanted to be a warden at a federal prison. I just said, oh wow, having the student's eyes on me rather than the inmate's eyes was a heck of a lot better. So I took the cowardly road out and went towards the students.
Coward.
Yeah, exactly. But who knows? We're just as likely to get attacked, right, as professors.
Yeah, obviously. It's interesting. So many people are afraid of inmates. They're afraid of working with inmates. Inmates are just people. They're people.
Right.
Most often they're fine. If they've been vetted to be put into your college class, chances are high that everything's going to be fine throughout.
Right.
So yeah, I get it though. And it, if we look to Anchorage, Alaska, for example, they're offering $10,000 hiring bonus, I believe. Last I
What?
checked.
Really?
Yeah, for corrections officers.
What's
They must be hurting for corrections officers.
What's the base pay?
I don't know the answer to that, but maybe that's an idea for your sabbatical. Is you go back to Anchorage, Alaska, and work as a corrections officer for a minute.
Work there
Give
for
yourself a nice little bump.
if I go up there and do it in the spring semester, there'll be no sunlight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you
You'll spend it in the prison anyway.
if you want a better deal, they're offering up to $25,000 signing bonus in King County right now, where I am.
Oh, that's wild. We can
12,000 for
Highest
brand
bidder.
new recruits and up to 25,000 for people with experience. So
Oh, well, I guess I can sleep on Britt's couch and go work for the Department of Corrections.
there you go. Yeah, it's a very comfy couch.
Yeah.
Uh, all right.
There's my sabbatical idea right there. Let's hope it holds out a few years.
Right. The ultimate goal of the sabbatical, yeah, you're supposed to do some research, but aren't you supposed to have days where your toughest decision is, should I sit on the edge of the lazy boy or should I sit on the edge of the couch?
I don't know. I assume so. I've never gotten a sabbatical before.
I have yet to have one, so but that's going to be one of my I want to have a day like that where I'm like, okay, what do I want to do today? Sit on the couch or the lazy boy?
Now, see, there's a book in this for you, though. When you become that corrections officer, you can write about being a corrections officer, but from the scholar standpoint. I don't think anyone's done that.
No.
We've had a few books, like American Prison, or what's that other one? What's the one where the journalist becomes a corrections officer?
I was going to say, the American Prison, that's hard to top. Going to work down there in that, private prison there in Louisiana. That's a tough one. That was such a good book. And his experiences down there at the Wyatt Correctional Facility. I know it wasn't Wyatt.
I forget, but I just looked it up. The answer is New Jack, Guarding
New
Sing
Jack.
Sing, where Ted Conover becomes a corrections officer and talks about his experience. But New Jack and American Prison, both.
New Jack was a good book too.
Recommended to listeners.
Yep. Oh, and the Hot House.
They got good insight into.
Throw out book recommend, you can't leave out the Hot House. That's the one that changed my life because, man, that was such a good book. Reading about Warden Matthews. That's the one that was like, oh, I want to do what he does.
Yeah. I would also recommend, I forget the author's name, but there's a book called Warden. I don't know if you've read this, but it was by the warden of a prison in Texas. I want to say Huntsville.
No, I don't know that one.
Warden by Jim Willett. Would recommend. It's an interesting insight into the administrative issues that a warden deals with on a day-to-day basis.
I'll look that.
Back to the topic at hand. Rhode Island DOC is interesting in that if you look across the states, I looked across the states, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 years ago, and Rhode Island had by far the lowest level of turnover amongst the states, tailed only by Massachusetts a little bit.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. They, better pay, better benefits than most states. So, same, working in a prison in Rhode Island is, you got to think if you're in a maximum security prison in Rhode Island, you're going to have the same issues that you have in a maximum security prison in New Mexico or Arizona, California, any of the, Ohio, any of those states. And the pay is significantly better here with better benefits. So you would figure they would have less turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. But what happens when corrections officers retire and the organizations end up shorthanded, they end up mandating people to stay for overtime sometimes. And so anytime we see a corrections officer shortage, we see more people being burnt out. But Rhode Island officers are allowed to work for up to 32 hours straight. So that covers some of the ground. And they get time and a half pay between 8 and 16 hours. And then after they get double time for up to 32 hours. With staffing shortages, a spokesman for the Rhode Island Department of Corrections said that if we don't see changes in staffing, they might actually be bringing in the National Guard to help staff the prison, as we've already seen happen in New Hampshire. And staffing shortages can also affect inmates too. They have to shut down some programs in some parts of the prison when there's not enough officers to staff the areas around programs. But for anyone interested, officers at Rhode Island DOC start around $62,000 a year and make up to $90,000 a year. And that does not include overtime. They've got a good benefits program, and there's lots of opportunity for advancement in specialized units.
That's something I always talk to our students about, or anybody who might be looking into possibly working for the Department of Corrections, is that, look, here's their base pay. This is what they say you're going to get. if as long as you work here for a year. But they always take home much more than that because of the overtime. And as soon as they start working overtime, they start to make a killing. Boy, all of my students that work at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which start out at a pretty similar rate as Rhode Island, they're all making $90,000-$100,000 a year because of the overtime. It's just, as you mentioned, with the shortages, there's overtime, and it pays well. So it's not like you're only gonna get a living wage. You will do better than a living wage, and you have good state benefits to go along with it.
For sure. It might be, looking at how this is a nationwide problem, though, it might speak to how we need to change conditions in prisons to make them more appealing for drawing people in to work in a prison. Another idea would be decarcerate.
Yeah.
By releasing more people, we can shut down some prisons. If we shut down some prisons, that requires fewer people to work there. I'm not saying lay anybody off, but instead consolidate to other prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the easiest ways to take care of that ratio. And people, whenever you talk about this, people often will say, well, where do you start, or who are you going to release? Well, obviously, you don't start with the violent offenders. You start with those drug offenders first, and let's get those individuals back out in society. And if they are drug users / abusers, get them into treatment rather than inside an institution where they're not getting the treatment they need.
Hell yeah. So another issue I wanted to touch upon is that disciplinary segregation policies are changing in Rhode Island. And this is a fancy term for solitary confinement. And this comes out of a 2020 ruling from the U.S. District Court. There was an inmate in Rhode Island named Richard Lee Paiva, and he challenged policies when he was held in disciplinary confinement for 60 days on one of his bookings. So at present, Rhode Island Department of Corrections is limited to 30 days of solitary confinement only for the most serious offenses in the prison, and 15 days for less serious offenses. They also can't stack disciplinary offenses. So if somebody gets in 3 fights, they can't say, well, that's 15 on 15 on 15, you're staying 45 days. It's just 30 days maximum. So after the 30-day period, inmates get returned either to general population, or they've got something called the step down program, titled the Restorative Housing Program, where inmates get back some of the privileges that they would have in general population, but not all. Like they get a TV, they get a radio, they get some commissary access, and some educational materials and services that can help them towards their rehabilitation. But it's a more humane way of reintroducing them rather than just keeping them in solitary confinement for longer. And when they are in solitary confinement or administrative segregation or disciplinary segregation, whatever you want to call it, in Rhode Island, inmates get a minimum of 3 hours a day outside of their cell every day for the first 15 days, and 3 hours out of their cell for the 15 days following. They also get a tablet, they get some reading material, and they are also allowed visitations while they are being held in disciplinary segregation. So there's some humanitarian standards being applied, and hopefully we see better outcomes.
Yeah,
for persons incarcerated.
That time outside their cell, man, that is key to hanging on to their mental health, because we know that total isolation, along with all of the sounds that go on, that the screaming and hollering and the banging that exist on and at those ADSEG or isolation units, they are it's just wear on individuals' mental health. And so getting some time out of their cell for some recreation, or just time for them to be outside a little bit, that makes a world of difference.
Yeah, just a little bit of fresh air.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
letting people go for like a walk around the yard,
Yep.
something like that, just anything.
Yep, getting that sunlight.
So that's all I've got for Rhode Island DOC. Are we ready to move on to the movie minute?
I believe we are.
Let's get into it.
Movie minute. Movie minute. 60 seconds with producer Britt to talk about movies.
All right. So this week we got 60 seconds on the clock. I watched Baywatch from 2017, starring starring The Rock and Zac Efron. Let me break it down for you. So, when a dangerous crime wave hits the beach, the legendary Mitch Buchanan, played by Dwayne The Rock Johnson, must lead his elite squad of lifeguards on a mission to uncover the murder of a city councilman. Joined by a trio of hotshot recruits, including former Olympian Matt Brody, played by Zac Efron, the team ditches the surf and goes deep undercover to take down a ruthless businesswoman whose devious plans threaten the future of the beach. This movie is full of pretty good action, all right comedy, and highly stylized modern production. Overall, the production and ensemble performances outshine the plot and the script, leaving a mostly okay movie that, if anything, is a pale shadow of the ridiculous fun offered by the original series. It also has David Hasselhoff.
Oh, David, the Hoff makes an appearance in this.
The Hoff is in here. Yes, yes, got to have the Hoff.
Is he the only? Is he the only original cast member who makes an appearance?
I believe so. I don't recognize most of the initial cast beyond Hasselhoff and then Pam Anderson when she comes in like season 7 or whatever. But yeah,
Very interesting.
It was all right. It was about what you'd expect. It didn't overcome like its initial like storyline or anything. Like I thought like the 21 Jump Street movies were like much better and a great update on them. This one was just
Oh, they're great.
kind of something different. It was like, hey, why don't we make like a cop movie out of Baywatch? And that's kind of what it was.
It feels like it's like drafting on the success of the 21 Jump Street films, and
Yeah.
it's also like I do like that they have to solve a murder. It goes back to Baywatch and how the lifeguards overextend their roles as lifeguards to include several duties of like law enforcement,
Mhm.
and I'm not even sure if probably federal agents at some point.
Yeah.
Am I wrong to think there's a firefighting scene in it? Like there's a boat explosion on the water. So
There is a boat explosion on the water. That's kind of like the big like plot line is the councilman gets blown up on the water on a boat, and so
Okay. All right. So yeah, for some reason I remember seeing something along those lines where there was some type of a boat explosion and somebody in a Baywatch uniform or outfit, bathing suit, whatever the hell we want to call it, jumping off a jet ski into a fire or some shit like that. I don't know.
I mean, you're describing the movie, but you're also describing every episode of Baywatch as well. So you might be right.
Oh, see, I guess since I've never watched an episode, I think I'm just too damn old.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. I'm an old fart over here. So it was, I was already grown up when it came out.
I'm halfway through season 7. I watched a few episodes with friends last night, and there was, I believe, the 4th or 5th episode to feature ghosts.
Mm.
There was one episode
What?
where it featured a 100-year-old mermaid,
Mm.
and and one episode where a large character in the show had recently passed, and they thought that her soul was possessing a dog, I believe, because the dog recycles. It was really good.
Yeah, when I die, brother, I'm gonna
Now,
come back and haunt you as a recycling dog. Just so you know.
Oh no,
I would expect nothing less of you.
I don't know that you'd have to be like the neighbor's dog, right? Because Beck,
Yeah.
you're not a cat guy, aren't you? You're not a dog person, right?
I am a catsman, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So.
I do love a dog, and I'm just not there yet in my life.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Fair.
that was a great
Hard to do
that
at
was a
this
great
point,
movie
but
minute.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very succinct, and
Yeah.
how a couple more questions. One, how often was this movie winking at the camera?
Very often. It was very self-referential, like I feel like I probably missed a couple of the Baywatch references, like the winking at the camera moments, just because I haven't watched much Baywatch. The only like major one I got was obviously when the Hoff showed up. I'm like, well, of course.
He still looks good for his
Oh,
age.
he's great. He has aged incredibly well. Dude's got to be like in his 70s now or something because he was in his 40s on Baywatch.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he started at 35, and it went 11 seasons if we count the 2 seasons of Baywatch Hawaii as well.
Right. And so, and also, yeah, Baywatch Nights, but that happened in the middle of Baywatch, right?
It happened concurrently with seasons 5 and 6. Baywatch expert over here.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's the knowledge you have of Baywatch, the series is just astounding.
You are truly a Baywatcher.
I agree. It is hard to have an encyclopedic knowledge of Baywatch, though, because there's simply too many episodes. But one complaint I do have is there is a character who is like on the verge of being an Olympian named Cody. Matt Brody was never an Olympian. So why not use the character who was the Olympian or like qualifying for the Olympics rather than Matt Brody, who never had anything to do with the Olympics? That doesn't make sense.
Compositing characters, I'm guessing.
It's sure to enrage fans.
All those fans who went to see the movie. No.
So Baywatch was at one point and still holds the record for being the most watched show in the world.
Correct.
And leaving David Hasselhoff as the most watched person on TV ever. He still holds the record for that. And I don't think it will be broken because everything's so fragmented now.
Germany loves him, right?
In the
Isn't
streaming
that what it is? Is that the Germans just can't get enough of Hasselhoff?
Yeah.
Yes. I do have to admit, I am currently reading his autobiography, Don't Hassle the Hoff. And he talks about how he will run into people from countries all over the world, and they'll talk about how they would gather on whatever evening of the week Baywatch would air. They would gather at one person's house. It maybe was the only TV in the village, and people would like pay a small admission to watch Baywatch together. So it's crazy that Baywatch has the numbers that it does. I don't entirely understand it, but I do love it.
It's amazing.
You know, hot people in bathing suits. That's all you need to understand. Like,
yeah, it's sometimes hard to tell with the show though how much, like, it's certainly campy, but how much of it is aware of what it actually is and how amazingly silly it is.
Good question.
Hard to say, but I'm glad you watched Baywatch. And do we have a movie on deck for the next movie minute?
We don't. Do y'all have any recommendations for me?
EB, what do you think?
I don't know. I have to see if I can rack my brain for something good here. That Baywatch is just it just seems pretty awful. So it's hard to find something on that level.
How about I watch a prison movie?
Oh, wait. You also didn't rank this one out of stars. You ranked the last one out of. You gave Arachnophobia 2.5 stars.
I'm gonna give this one, honestly, 2.5 stars. It's not a bad movie. If you like Baywatch, it's probably worth watching just to like get those references and enjoy the Hoff cameo and all that stuff. But yeah, 2.5 stars. It's not bad, not great. It's but it doesn't entirely suffer from mediocrity. It's highly watchable, I'll say. But yeah, 2.5 stars. So 2.5 star films so far. Next episode, how about I watch 2006's Let's Go to Prison?
Oh, that just sounds awful.
Yes, please inform us.
Yeah, directed by Bob Odenkirk, starring Will Arnett and Dax Shepard.
Oh,
I've heard Bob Odenkirk on podcasts discussing, like, essentially apologizing for this movie. So I'm curious to hear what you think of it.
Yeah, it's very poorly rated. And
excellent.
Just to paint a picture for you here, the cover for the movie is a shower drain with a bar of soap sitting next to it, and the bar of soap says "Let's go to prison." It certainly is.
You gotta stop. No,
I'm very sorry.
Oh, the Rotten Tomatoes 13%. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, not well rated.
Well, we are curious to hear what you think of this, Sailor.
Oh.
All right, so I think it's time to call it a day. That's been the podcast. Thanks for listening to Prison Breakdown. Please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. I've been Beck Strah.
And this is Eric Bronson. And lights out.
Lights out, baby.